it's Joy and Lindsay, Meet Me in the Middle, back with Meeting in the Middle with Irena Jansen, who originally from Croatia, now lives in the DC area of the United States. A whole big long story that we can talk about sometime. But right now, oh my goodness, we have had two of the most amazing sessions with her already. And, you know, we were talking about, is this a podcast? Is this a talk show? Is this a video? We don't know what we are. If you guys want to tell us what we are, you know, we're something like that.
Help us.
Help us. Hey, tell us what you would, you know, give us some ideas of what to name our thing.
Yeah.
How about that? We're always going to be Meet Me in the Middle, but are we a podcast or are we a video cast or are we a talk show? What are we? Okay. Anyway, that was a side note. Okay, so Irena has written or is in the process and will finish this book that has to do with the middle. And I wanted to, actually, she told me the working title was Meet Me in the Middle. So we just have a big connection with that. She ended up, she's going to change the title. She'll tell us about that. But I want her in this, we want her in this segment to talk about her middles. And I'm going to list some things that are kind of have been some major middles for her. And then she can kind of break some of that down. Grieving. She lost her brother. He was maybe in his 20s or 21 in a car crash, very tragically, very sudden. So the grief of losing her own brother, long singleness, chronic illness, infertility, loneliness, depression, anxiety, and also being very far away now. She's in the United States, but her family of origin is all in Croatia, and her parents are, you know, getting on up in age. So there's all of that.
And the war was
and the war, and we had yes, we don't want to forget the war was in the middle of all that. She was in a communist country and living in the middle of the war. Oh my goodness, this girl, she's way beyond her years. So okay, that was enough of that intro. Whew. Dig into the middle, and we'll
take my.
Get your fan out.
My fan. This just got me. Let's talk about. You know, like I mentioned at the beginning of our first little session, I'm just so excited to be here with Meet Me in the Middle. I know about you, and when I first heard the title, I talked to Carrie, and I was like, "That's the title of my book." So we're kindred spirits here. Yes. Just the concept of like meet me in the middle, and just a quick introduction. So during the war, which happened in the 90s in Croatia, we had to flee our home, live as refugees, or it's called displaced people, because we never left our own country. We're just in the free part of the country, but lost our home and everything. Survived that war. Our lives were in danger, almost killed on multiple occasions. I can tell you my war story some other time, but
true war stories.
Yeah. When I came to America and at Biola, they wanted me to speak about that. And I spoke at a chapel with like thousands of students there. And I spoke about the joy. There's this moment, very like real, palpable moment when God just infused joy in me in the middle of the war as we were sleeping on the floor in this low rented apartment. And I spoke about, you know, Philippians 4 and joy despite circumstances. And after that, everybody got up. After I finished, they got up and they gave me a standing ovation for a long time. And I was like, you know, here I was, like I had survived the war and I was so victorious. And it took me years and years, you know, to work through that and realize I wanted to kind of stop talking about the war because I felt like it alienated people. They saw me as a person who had victoriously won over this hardship in life. And I didn't think they could relate to me because how many people experience war, and they saw me as a survivor and this like superhuman person who had joy in the middle of, and that's all true. But as I was speaking to them about this truth about God being my joy in the middle of circumstances, I was also this scared person who was filled with post-traumatic stress disorder, who was alone and lonely away from her family. I had a great time in college at Biola University, loved every minute of it. But there was things happening to me. I was in the middle of hard things then. And the more I thought about it since then, I realized I want to talk to people from my middles, from what I am in the middle of now, because that's where most people are. There are victorious stories in our lives where we can speak about how God has helped us and we have won over a hardship or have beaten illness, or a tough marriage was restored, or there's victorious stories, but for most of our life we are in the middles, and I wanted to somehow connect to people who are in their middle. And so I wanted to see, how can I invite others to meet me in my middle and say, this is what I'm going through now. And at our church, I was so blessed that they invited me to share at a women's retreat. And I came to the women's ministry leader and I said, I'm so broken now. There's things going on in our lives. My husband was going through a hard time, transition in career. I was dealing with my really painful chronic illness, and I was like, I'm broken. And she said, speak from that. And I spoke from that, and I got up and I said, God is present with me here now. I don't have a victorious story to this particular part of my story yet. I wanted to invite people to meet me in this middle and tell them, like, come meet me in my middle. And I wanted to become so conscious to go and meet people in their middles. They are going with them to doctor's appointments, to sitting with them in their grief, sitting with them in their heart. Like, how can I just go and meet them in their middles, not try to cure it right away? But most importantly, finally, how does God then meet us in our middles? Meet me in the middle. It's like 3 layers. How do I invite others to meet me in my middle? How do I go and meet them in their middles? But then how does God meet us in our middle? And he's so fully present. And it gave me a whole new reading of Psalm 23. When I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, the darkest valley, it doesn't say, when you lead me out of the valley, then I will be victorious. It's like, I'm still in the valley. And I love this part when it says, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. He doesn't say, you're going to defeat the enemies, then we're going to have a feast. God is like, the enemies are still there. You're in the middle of the danger, and I'm preparing a feast for you. Yes. Like of your enemies when you're in the valley. Like God prepares a feast in the middle. He's in the middle. He doesn't promise us even that we're going to get out of that valley. I'm with you in that valley. The feast is before your enemies. And I was like, how can I dwell and talk about that? And so then when all this, and you had mentioned some of these middles, and I started realizing that some of the middles that were in my life were going to be with me until I go to the heavenly kingdom. And it actually freed me not to wait for the end of those middles. And there are and so I started kind of putting middles in different categories. And I said, there are those middles that we know once they enter our lives, they will never leave us until we're in God's house. Wow. And that one of those is grief. And I know it changes and we get healing and changes, but once grief enters, and I think that's why it's one of the scariest things in our life, one of the scariest middles, because even if we're not aware of it, we know will never leave us. That person, when that person is gone, they are gone forever until we see them in heaven. But that's why grief, and I was like, the grief for my brother will be with me until I see him again in heaven. And this is the middle that I will be in it forever, but God will be with me in it. The war is over. So the war was the middle, that the actual war is over. My PTSD and the fears that came with that, they will be with me. God has brought healing, and that will be with me. Chronic illness. Sometimes we're ill, and sometimes we get healed, get better, and so those middles end. But some illnesses, like I struggle with endometriosis, which caused infertility. We don't know which came first, but and I'm slowly realizing, and I realized that my chronic illness and my infertility will be with me until I die. And rather than trying everything to fight it or to negate it, or, I was just like, this is where I'm living. God, what are you having me birth? What are you putting inside me? What am I birthing? How do I live in this now? Like, how do I embrace it and accept it and have God speak to me and embrace me and love me and walk with me? Because it's not going away. And I can't tell you how much freedom it brought to say, it's not going to end. And I'm not talking here that people can go and like, you can get treatments and this, and we've tried, I'm not talking about against that. I'm just saying, once I realized like this is going to be with me forever. I was single. I got married when I was 36. That was one of those middles where you were like, is it going to end? Is it not going to end? I don't know. Oh God, is this going to be my middle for the rest of my life? I hope not. But for many years in my life, marrying age, when do you start thinking about marriage? Like 18. So for like 18 other years, I was like, maybe that's going to be my middle. How do I live in it? How do I invite community? How do I live with other single ladies? How do I, get connected to other children and be? So that particular middle ended at 36 when I got married to my wonderful husband. But you know what happened then? I got married, happily married, love my husband, but I had to leave my family, my country, my life that I had been building for 30 some years, and come to a new country, new land. I was a foreigner where I had to kind of build my life from scratch almost. I went to college, but I was lonely. There was this like crust that enveloped me of loneliness. People outside saw this bubbly Irena, but I knew that on the inside I was lonely. I had to figure out who I was. The singleness middle ended. I entered another middle that lasted. It took about 8 years for me to finally kind of recognize it, to go to healing prayer, for God to break that crust, to start healing in my life, to remind me how he and I have this language of art and how he speaks to me, and for me to kind of spring into life again. So that middle, kind of is ending now. There are those middles that kind of end, but we don't know if they're going to end.
Right.
You hope they're going to end, but some you're there. So now I'm away from my family. Now that the whole this crust that enveloped me of loneliness and depression is gone. I'm still away from my family. I fear for their safety. There was just I just had a house fire. I fear going to sleep because I'm afraid to get up, because usually I find out something happened because they're 6 hours ahead. I wake up to like there's been a fire, or after they had a devastating fire in their house that destroyed about a quarter of their property, their lives were saved miraculously. They had an earthquake in Croatia, 6.2, devastating earthquake. My parents, God saved their lives. God protected their house, but my hometown is destroyed. So many people there displaced. I mean, it's just, it is horrible. And even this morning, I wake up, 4.2. I call my parents. They're still shaking. So now I'm worried about them and trying to help them. So now I'm in this middle. So there's like middles that end, but then another one comes. But there are those ones that never leave us. My infertility, my grief, my PTSD. There are certain things that, so how does God leave us how does God stay with us in those middle? And so I realized what I ran to, or how God was with me in those middles, is what I call, and this is the new title of my book.
Okay.
Meet Me in the Middle. And it's like a mouthful. And my friend is like, I don't like this title. It's kind of strange, but it's called Path Stops for the Middle.
Oh, okay.
Not that even, it doesn't roll right off the tongue. You have to pause. You have to say path stops for the middle. So you have to stop to say
that again.
Path stops, like a path. Stop for the middle. So path stops for the middle. So what does that mean? So as we're in the middle, it's kind of, I was inspired by this phrase of pit stop. you're on a journey, there's a pit stop, and that's where you stop to get refreshment, to, the cars get the tires changed, or, like in Formula One, the pit stops, and for me, it's like our life is this dark valley. And it even says, even in Psalm 23, says he guides me along the right paths. I love that word, the path.
Yeah.
And as we're walking along the path through this valley, God is setting up these path stops. He tables a feast in the presence of the enemies. All I need to do is just stop there and allow God to feed me, to speak to me. And that to me, and I realized that 2018 was a really rough year. Just everything kind of came to a head. Right. And I went to healing. My friends at church were telling me about healing prayer for a long time. And I was like, I'm capable. I'm healing. And finally, I joke, but it was almost literally, I came crawling and crying and bleeding to church. Like, I need healing prayer. And God spoke to me. God brought healing. But it was a path stop that God had along the path the whole time. But I never stopped to allow God to speak to me through it.
Yeah.
The community of people, when I was curled up on my bed in a fetal position, just sobbing and crying, and finally just called a friend who I knew did not have she was in between jobs, and I just called her. I'm like, Christy, can you come be with me? I finally reached out. She came and sat with me on our bed for hours in my middle. I allowed her to see me sobbing and crying and ugly. I invited her in my middle. She sat with me in my middle, literally on my bed. And God met us in that middle. And I was like, God, invite community, and God has people for me. I mean, there's so many stories, but songs, I would listen to songs, and I was like, I'm just going to listen to Christian radio just because I can't let any other words enter my head. Yeah. And God would send songs. So I created a playlist of my fight songs. I would call it Irena's fight songs. And then I would listen to them. And when we would hear devastating news about my husband's job, or there were hard things, I was just like, where are my fight songs? I
get the fight songs.
Listen, and God would send me the exact song that I needed to hear. And now when things have kind of gotten better, I have my victories playlist. So I listen to those, but then in the last few weeks, we've had some other kind of things that caused me some anxiety. And I was like, I got to go back to the fight songs. So I've been listening to the fight songs again, and reminded, my fight song playlist is like a journal. When I hear each one of them, I was like, this is what happened then. And during that 2018, my husband's 43-year-old sister died of colon cancer. And so her song that she listened to, Casting Crowns, the storm. I
Praise You in This Storm.
That's on there. So when I ever hear that song, I think of Laura, and I think of that. And each song, this is what God spoke. This is how God was with me. This is what God spoke through this song. It's like a journal. And so it's like those songs. And then so there's all those, that's what I call the path stops, is knowing how God speaks to me and making the effort, the feeble effort, as I'm bleeding and crawling and crying, put myself in the path of God speaking to me. And one of the things that God used during healing prayer, he reminded me how he speaks to me through art. And things like that in YFC Croatia, I've I studied literature in college. I've always been, and done things with art. But God reminded me, I speak to you through that. Put yourself in the path so I can speak to you through this. And God gave me this, and there's this special image that God gave me during that healing prayer that started bringing healing and reminded me of that path stop of art. And so I went to the Smithsonian. I got a certificate in world art history through the Smithsonian. Now I've gone back to college. I'm getting another bachelor's degree, maybe even a master's degree. I'm studying art history because that is like, God, it speaks to me through that. And then I can share those stories and encourage other people. So it's like this whole not new life. God didn't just all of a sudden create this new Irena. He just this is what you've been doing the whole time. It was this
Yeah.
thing. You just kind of remind me like that song, The Defender.
Yeah.
It says, you knew where I lost me. You put me back together, put my pieces back together. Like that's my song. When I thought I lost me, you knew where I left me. You pieced me back together, you put me back together. That's how I feel now, and like studying art and seeing how God speaks to that. And even my husband, I listen to lectures online now because of the pandemic. Scott would sometimes listen to the lecture and he goes, your teacher's preaching. She's because a lot of art is about religious art, and she talks about it kind of in an intellectual manner. She's like, she's preaching. I was like, yeah, she's preaching. It's about, and then I take it even further. So I'm sorry, I've kind of been going on, but it's just, so that's what I'm writing about now. I just want to tell what
Path
God has
stops.
done in my life. I want to tell the story of how God has brought healing and how this perspective, all I'm asked to do is just put myself in the path stops of God using, and that has also helped me. Just this is what last point. This has also helped me to fight my judgmental spirit about churches and other people, because you go to church, you hear a sermon, you listen to this, and you're like, was this a good sermon? And should I go to this church or should I go to that? I was like, I'm just gonna go, and not because it's Sunday, I gotta go to church. It's Sunday, I gotta listen to the sermon, like this whole legalistic, I'm like, I want to put myself in the path of what God has for me this morning. That's all. I'm not like going to church because it's going to church. I need to put myself in the path because I gotta hear from God. So it kind of takes the pressure off of the preacher, the church. Like, it does not have anything for me. Maybe it's not the style that I have appreciated before, but God's like, I can use anything. I can use this style, I can use that style, I can use this. And so it kind of helps me not to judge sermons, the churches, the lectures, whatever, just to be like, God, what do you have for me here?
Yes.
Speak to me. I mean, God can speak to me through a song, through radio. I used to kind of be prejudiced against Christian radio, and I have to admit, I turn it off when they talk.
I know, me too.
But God uses the songs to someone. He might speak through what they say, so I don't want to, judge that. But it's just really taken this pressure and judgmental spirit. I mean, I'm still having to fight it and be disciplined. But just like, God, what do you have for me? Because you know what? In the end, it's not the preacher. It's not the song. It's not the sermon. It's not the art. Art is not magical. It's God who speaks to me. He just chooses to use these things. And sometimes he has to speak to me directly. This last week, I told you we kind of had this hard time and I was anxious about something and I was going around and I started in my mind to worry about the situation. And then like I told Scott, it's like God's playing defense. And as soon as my thought would go somewhere, God was like, stop. Have I taken care of you so far? And he wouldn't let my thoughts go any further. And I have it on my board here. Last year, he also played defense with, do you trust me?
Yeah.
When I was worried about having to move and all this, God's like, do you trust me? Don't even go there. Do you trust me? And so I was like, Scott, God's playing defense again. Whenever I start worrying about what's going to happen, he's like, have I taken care of you so far? Right. Have I? Come on, stop. He's like a big, defense football thing. Yeah. And so sometimes God has to speak like that, but it's God who speaks. It's not my ability. It's not because I'm so good and I go to church and I read the Bible and I listen to Christian songs. That all just makes me legalistic. It's not because I do anything. God uses it. But because I know this language between God and me, I'm kind of like, well, I'm going to go to a museum with the expectation that maybe God will speak to me through.
Yes, wherever.
Yeah, for you, taking walks, finding hearts.
Yes, exactly. Lindsay, what?
When you talk about God playing defense, because I read Psalm 78 all the time. And I've entitled that, well, it has like a little title, and I have the Message Bible, and it said, no, I have the Clear Word, I'm sorry. And it says God's kindness to his people. But when you read the whole chapter, there's a part in there where they're challenging God and they're saying, can you?
Mhm.
Can you do this? And so
Oh,
I've entitled that chapter, Can You?
I like that.
So when you're saying that he is playing defense, Psalm 78 is like, yes, I can.
yeah,
Yes, I can.
yeah,
I've done it here. I've done it here. I've done it there. Why are you doubting me again?
Mhm.
yeah,
You know?
yeah.
So, I mean, what you're saying
Woo.
is so beautiful, so profound. It's so
Mm.
timely.
Mm.
I love the way that your perspective how you've taken in that there are some middles that are going to last you until you die or until Jesus
Yeah.
comes. I mean, I'd never even looked at it that way, but it's so true. And there are some middles that do have a beginning and an end. And so I love the way that you've categorized them. That just sinks into my soul. That's something I'm going to use from now on, because it's so deep. It's really profound. It really is. But I want to end this, unless you have a few more things.
No, other than I was just dying to see her artwork because she didn't hold it up there long enough.
Oh, I saw just a little something.
Like, I want to see that in a minute. Okay, go ahead.
But just ending with you talking about the stripping and the bare branches, and that really stuck out to me too while you've been talking and sharing your experience and sharing your journey. And I love the way that your parents' God has become your God.
Yeah.
And I can see them and I can see him all in you. Everything you talk about, there is a tight weaving of God and the sincerity of God in your life. And I really appreciate that about you. This is our first time really meeting. I've heard a lot about you, but I'm like, okay, where have you been all my life? This is another mister from somewhere else. But I feel a kindred spirit with you, and I know the spirit knows spirit. And I love the way that you have woven everything together to talk about not only your book and blessings on you as you continue writing that and wrapping that up.
Yes, wrapping it up.
Yes, but just on your perspective of that whole bare branch stripping and the different categories of being in the middle.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for, I mean, I feel like I've gone to church today.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
really,
we have.
I feel like, I mean, it's been so powerful and so meaningful to sit and listen and just talk back and forth with you in joy. And so it's uplifted my spirits today to know that God plays defense for us all the time, and we have to remember.
Yes.
Remember, we can't forget.
Thank you so much for your kind words, and what you said in the end. It's just it really is such an encouragement to me. Thank you. And one thing I did, you reminded me to mention just even about the path stops. You know, as I think about how God provides for us, like, so what am I called to do? I need to be a path stop for somebody else. And that is my calling in life, just to be a path stop, share about what God has done in my life. And if somebody can just come and warm themselves up. Scott and I always talk about how we love our house to be someday to have a fireplace, and just like the fireplace, such an example of, you have a fire, if somebody can just come and warm themselves up next to it. And I think that's kind of the image of the path stop. And I think that's what we're just called to be. Going back to my parents, and like, nobody, you know, not everybody's Tim Keller, but can we just be honest about our struggles and still being in the middle, and in that way just provide and be a path stop for somebody who's in need. It takes humbling from God to break down our designs of grandeur. Say, can I just be a path stop? And then God is the one that's going to weave it all together into his story story and the story that he's writing.
Speaking
Wow.
of, can we see that art again?
Yes.
Okay, so let me just really quickly, when during the healing prayer, it was a really hard time, and I was telling them that I was kind of feeling, I was feeling very much like hunched down, like broken, carrying a heavy burden, just kind of trying to help other people and my husband by like doing things and just feeling like that.
Yeah.
And God brought this image, and this, I did not draw this. My friend who was in healing prayer with me, she quickly sketched this for me after I told her what I had seen. And then another friend gave it to a friend who's an artist to kind of add color to it and add the Psalm 20 that then God brought to connect with it. And Psalm 20 is the last message my brother sent me before he died. So that's a whole other story about, but so I felt so hunched, and then God gave me this image. I don't think you can see well here because of the glare.
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. Hold it a little closer. Hold it a little closer. Okay. Yeah. Wow.
What?
I'm sorry?
It says Jehovah something?
Jehovah Nisi.
Yes.
And it said, so the image is basically of a woman standing on the edge of a cliff.
Right.
Standing upright.
Yes.
Wrapped in colorful cloth that are blowing in the wind.
Yeah.
She's holding a banner, and she's taking a step forward. This has so many layers to my story, but immediately it was like, I'm not this hunched person. God wants me to stand up. I'm under his banner. I'm under his banner. And the colorful, there's a whole other story where color plays in my life and all this colorful blowing in the wind, the lightness of the spirit. But the step, and I like stepping forward, and it's a cliff. And it's faith. And God is like, you take the step, I will build the ground underneath it. As it's not about your ability or your like 5-year plans. It's about taking the step, and God will build the ground. So there's so many aspects to this, but the immediate one was just God's healing and saying, you get up. And then as this was unraveling, the other lady that was praying with me said, some of the things you're going to continue doing are going to look exactly the same. You're still going to be serving and helping, but your spirit, you're going to be doing it from a different place, under God's banner. And this is not me like being victorious. It's like God is the one that's victorious. He's the one that's victorious. He's the one that knows. It's not my ability. I'm taking steps, and he's like, you trust me. So there's just so many things to this. And then Psalm 20. So I had this during healing prayer, and then I was driving home, and I turned on the radio, and the song by Jeremy Camp, Same Power, came on. Same power that rose Jesus from the dead lives in us. And then I came home, and I looked in my room. I have this Psalm 20 framed, because it was the last message that my brother sent me on my birthday right before he died. And it says that may we shout for joy over your victory and lift up our banners in the name of our God. And some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. They are on their knees and fall, but we rise up and stand firm. And this whole Psalm 20. And so it was like God gave me this image, and then the song of same power. It's like the same power that rose Jesus from the dead lives in us. And it's God's power, not my power. And when I come home and I read the Psalm 20, I'm reminded that I've been reading for decades, since my brother gave it to me. And it's about the banner and victory and standing upright. All of that. And God is like, I'm sending messages to you. Are you hearing me? Are you hearing me? And that kind of began the healing process. And God, through this, also reminded me, I do speak to you through art. So put yourself in the path of art so I can continue to speak to you through that. Okay,
I'm going to challenge you. You are to paint a picture or draw whatever medium you want to use, but of a tree with the bare branches and all of that in some way of how God has spoken such beauty from the bare branches into your life. So if you haven't done...
Yes, but
she's going to get it.
My house is filled with pillows.
No, I want your
I'm obsessed with bare branches and
but I want you to do it coming out of you. And what he did in you is what I heard is that he ignited that flame that he had already put in you.
Mhm.
he put me back together. He put me back together.
Mhm.
But you know, like that song says, when I tell of him, when I tell my story, I tell of him.
Yeah.
And that's the only way to tell our stories, to tell of him.
Oh.
It really isn't. He's the
Well,
one.
hey, Revelation says we overcame by
The
the blood of the
Lamb and the word of our testimony.
Yeah. From the middle, but we're still in the middle. But that's the beauty of it. God's right in the middle of it.
He's right in the middle with us. Oh, thank God for you, Irena. And Scott, thanks, Scott, for sharing you with us today. And thank you for doing what you're doing where you are. And you are touching so many lives just in ways I know you don't even realize, you know, and just even you and I talking on the phone the other day, just infused life into me, you know, infused life into me. And you just have that way about you that God has given you to just be a life infuser for other people. And I thank you. You know, I love you. And now you've got a new sister up here.
Thank you. Thank you for this time to speak together of what God has done and of what God is doing, because God knows that we are so broken. I am so broken, and I know I can't do it on my own. I tried, and I was crawling and bleeding, and I can't. And so it's just wonderful to meet kindred sisters.
Yes.
And think of what God has done and how he is with us in the middle. And then he infuses us with life.
Yeah. And he will do. He can do it.
Yes,
He can still do it.
Can you? Is that Psalm 78? I wrote it.
Yes.
He can. Oh man, this has just been so good for my heart and soul. And we got a lot of really spiritual attacks going into this, and I knew it would be good. I knew it had to be good.
I know, but this was stepping out and not knowing what was underneath, but he provided.
Yes. Yeah.
So I give God the glory for this today. And, you know, thank you, Father, for your mighty hand of blessing on us today and for creating sisterhood between us just like that.
Yes.
You know, it's just a beautiful, it's so hard to kind of wrap it up, but, you know, I guess otherwise we'd be on here all day long.
Yes,
Listen, we might need to do, you know, in a couple of months, we might need to do a little recap on a couple of things.
Keep me accountable about that writing, because I get distracted.
Yeah, we want to see that book cover and you know that
I might have to change the title because people just can't pronounce it. But for now, it gives me focus on what I'm writing about, even if the title.
But not only that, it makes you stop to even say it. Path stops.
Yes.
For the middle. It makes you stop. And so I think in a way that's kind of good. Path stops for the middle. Mm-hmm. It's okay. You do whatever, because that's important. Yeah. Guys, thank you for hanging with us and listening. Oh, it's just been so good. Until we meet again.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.